Can I invite now Vice President Bharrat Jagdeo and General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party to make his tribute and address.
Mr. President, colleagues of the Cabinet, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the family of Dr. Luncheon, ladies and gentlemen, the People's Progressive Party and our country have lost one of our best sons. Last Friday, we held a night of reflection to speak about Dr. Luncheon and what he meant for the People's Progressive Party. And all of the speakers who spoken that evening, they pointed out to his role in the PPP as a central figure in the growth and development of the People's Progressive Party. At that time, I said something which I want to repeat here today. Over the past few years, it was uncomfortable for me personally to talk to Roger, because every time I speak to him, I felt this sense of intense sadness. And as I said then, and I repeat here, that here was this great intellect trapped in a failing body. And he had so much to offer yet, but the body would not allow him to do that. And it was very, for those of you who know Freedom House, we held our executive meeting on the 4th floor of Freedom House. And Roger Luncheon couldn't climb those stairs. So he came to the party meetings on the back of his driver, an assistant. But he, although I'm sure he felt ill and terrible, but he saw it important to be at the party meetings where we discuss the future of this country and many of our policies. When we were selecting the presidential candidate, Dr. Luncheon left a recording. He said, "I'm feeling ill. I don't know whether I would be able to make it to the meeting, the final meeting to select the presidential candidate for 2020. Or I don't know whether I'd live to see it. But this is my view as to who we should support." And so, looking at another painful experience of mine was when Roger, in the period under APNU, he was at my office, at the office of the leader of the opposition, and they sent police to arrest him in his wheelchair. And I sat there that day, and it was almost an out-of-body experience. Here was someone who gave practically his whole life to this country, in service of this country, who helped many of the people when we were in government, who sent the police to get him. And they had no gratitude, they had no decency We asked, if you feel that there was some wrongdoing, why not take this statement at home or here at the office? They said, the police said, no, we have to arrest him and take him to where they were doing the interrogation. And so sometimes in life, people pay all sorts of gratitude to service. But when it comes to them delivering on those, they don't. And I saw the statement from APNU after his passing. And on that occasion, they could have been generous. But they chose to accuse him of being part of the crime spree, being responsible for the crime spree in Guyana, and secondly, that he was the reason why the talks between the PNC and PPP broke down. Both false. And let me say today here that anyone who tries to destroy or taint Roger's legacy we will firmly, in the People's Progressive Party, I personally will defend that. I'm telling you this here today. And that is why last Friday I said I wanted to speak some uncomfortable truth about that crime spree and about who was involved. And it may be uncomfortable to many people who have retired and some who are still serving. But today, we've heard a lot, and maybe it's not the occasion for it. But trust me, I will do it. I will do it, because he deserves that the country knows the truth about what really took place. I sat with Roger, and the leadership of the Army and police will bring a report to us about the situation that was taking place on the ground when ordinary people were being slaughtered, ordinary soldiers and policemen killed. And the leadership would bring a report, and then 5 minutes later, we'd get a call from some patriotic officers saying to us, the reports were sterilized. All the important things were taken out of the report. They knew exactly what was happening, where the guns were going, etc. And they chose, for political reasons, to sterilize those reports. And they thought they were duping us. They were not. Because you have, among the soldiers, many who were patriotic enough to say, we will carry out our professional responsibility. In the Army, we hear a lot. And I said then, and I'm saying it here today again. Today, the budget, the capital budget of the Army is over $3 billion. In 1990, 89, and 90, the Army's capital budget was less than the salary of one Foreign Service officer. It sounds unthinkable. It sounds unthinkable, but that's the reality. That's our starting point, to rebuild the Army and professionalize it. But there will be another occasion at which we will explore that issue and about who was really involved. I was very fortunate that in 1993, when I became a minister, I landed a seat in the cabinet next to Roger. And so throughout the cabinet sessions, and those were long sessions in those days, I would have a running commentary on individuals and their presentations. So I knew what pleased him and what didn't please him. And then I saw the many notes that were passed by cabinet ministers and others trying to influence Roger. Now, he wasn't very good with paper. He left them all on the table, so I read all of them. So it was very, very interesting. And then Roger served me in the period that he served as HPS Cabinet Secretary and Secretary to the Defense Board. More than half of that period was under my presidency. And so many people came to rely, presidents came to rely on luncheon. I'd look at Dr. Jagan sitting next to Roger. And when there was a presentation from a cabinet member, and it seemed as though there would be a general support of the cabinet on that issue, but he disagreed with it, Dr. Luncheon would turn to Roger and just look at him. And then Roger will oppose it. And once Roger opposed it, then Dr. Luncheon would say, we don't have consensus. I used the same tactic many times. The cabinet members wanted a salary increase at one time, and we couldn't. The time was such that we could not afford it. Luncheon played the same role. So you're going to hear from Luncheon about Luncheon later. He's doing his own eulogy, and that is typically Roger. But most of us can only speak about our impressions of him. Many people talk about Roger and medicine, and they say, why didn't Roger stay in medicine? He would have made a great doctor and no doubt been probably wealthy. My own view is that he switched profession, although not totally, because he still used to have his patients come and visit him at the office of the president, and he kept his registration intact. So it's because medicine did not give him that high-pressure, dynamic environment, and Roger needed that to operate in a high-pressure, dynamic environment. Politics and the administration of government allows you to do that. There were times in that office we had 4 meetings running simultaneously between his office and mine, because such was the time that we had to do that. And that was a different era. And so today, in retrospect, this morning I'm lying in bed and thinking back to that period when there was huge turmoil in this country. We had 5,000 people on the street, 3 years of protests on the street, false claims, using false claims that the PPP had rigged the elections. We had a situation where the country was bankrupt. Over 100% of revenue was used to service debt. And therefore, to create a strategy and return Guyana to economic viability, it required a particular type of management. I've heard people call it stingy, frugal. But Roger was a man for that era. He was the best ally that a minister of finance could have found in the head of the presidential secretariat when I was minister of finance, because he understood the challenges of the time. No money, huge needs in health, education, infrastructure, and a lot of high expectations in the country. And without him holding the rein tightly there, as head of the presidential secretariat and cabinet secretary, and ensuring that the permanent secretaries all had a like-minded view that this was the approach that we had to pursue, that it was a tough path towards financial viability. Today, we can say that we have one of the lowest debt figures and debt servicing figures in the world, coming from the highest in the world when we started, largely because of a sustained economic strategy that Luncheon was central to. Many people think that when we write the history of Guyana, the political history of Guyana, Luncheon would be a central figure there. But he should also be a central figure when we document the economic history of Guyana, because such were the times. We have to continue to explore this. This is not an occasion for it. Something else that Luncheon battled. Now, this is something that the PPP has always faced. This charge that it's a racist party, an Indian party, and that Afro-Guyanese can never progress under a PPP government. And the facts are different. That is why we say today, if you look at the fact, a fact-based approach and a fact-based analysis, you would see that the greatest progress has been made in people's lives and in economic terms under PPP governments for all Guyanese people, including Afro-Guyanese. The greatest progress. But only if you approach it in a fact-based manner. You look at real issues, from housing, jobs, business, everything else. Not from the emotional point of view that some people thrive on. And Roger Luncheon was one of the figures who helped to, it was an uncomfortable thorn in the side of those, because he helped to bring that fact-based approach to many Guyanese through his weekly press conferences. And he, because of his unmatched intellect, they hated him, many people hated him with a passion. I don't think personally, but because he was so inconvenient to their narrative. He remained an inconvenience to their narrative until today, because here was a black person who wielded so much power in the People's Progressive Party government as cabinet secretary, as HPS, and as secretary to the Defense Board. Power that only probably was superseded by that the president had more than Roger Luncheon, but at a practical level. And unfettered almost, because there was absolute trust in Luncheon's judgment from the political leadership of the party and his commitment to the cause of this country. And so today, we continue to battle that narrative. And for him, and for many others, Afro-Guyanese particularly, who joined the PPP in the early period. Now it's becoming easier because our numbers have grown enormously. But in the early days, they were vilified, harassed, largely because of what they stood for. Roger Luncheon kept the PPP grounded. Now, Roger did not get the opportunity to go out as much as many other of the cabinet ministers, because he held the office of the president when the president and ministers were on outreach. But he never lost that connection with people, the touch. PPP governments are characterized by their connection with grassroots. The moment the PPP becomes elitist is the moment that it would fail in its historic mission and vision, which was part of its formation in the 1950s, to bring our people together, all of our people together, to work for Guyana, all of our people, and to work for the dispossessed and working people. That was important to that office. And so, when people came from rural areas, in particular the hinterland, but anywhere in Guyana, there was always the office of the president, even when we were under assaulted, remain a friendly environment to people. They came in there and see large numbers of people. We'd spend 1 minute with them, 2 minutes, luncheon, we'll just pop in and say hello to them. We kept it open because we didn't want the office to be intimidating. Even when we had an attack on the office of the president, people stormed the office of the president, we never changed anything there. There was a chain link fence that kept the office open to the public from the days of Burnham. We kept it there until APNU built a fortress, a 12-foot wall shutting the place around. And today, I find it very uncomfortable working there. It's almost like a fortress. I can understand why the president does a lot of the meetings from State House. It is this connection. It is, I don't want to be political, but Roger Luncheon, we would not spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a fence to keep people out even when we are under threat. Thousands of people in the street trying to overthrow the government. We kept it connected to the people. And Roger Luncheon was a central part of that. So Roger Luncheon means a lot to us in the party. We never be able to replace him, his intellect and everything else. There's so many things that personally we had to work on during that difficult period that will probably go to the grave with all of us, as Luncheon took them to the grave. But this country is richer. This country is wiser. This country is stronger because of Roger Luncheon. And I'm proud to say that I work with this gentleman and I learned from this gentleman. He was part of my government and a key figure in the government that allowed me as president to succeed. We changed in the tough times the whole trajectory of this country. And today, I want to thank the family for being here. I know many of you may not have been able, like many of us, to keep in touch with Roger. There's some who were with him more in the last years. I want to thank them for the help that they accorded. But I want to thank all of you for for sharing Roger Luncheon with us. The PPP is poorer today because of his loss. Thank you.